And you are live.
Thank you. Well, welcome to the October 19th Annapolis Planning Commission meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. Can I have the roll call, please, Kimberly?
Mr. Klein,
Present.
Ms. Pico. She is present. Mr. Imes,
Here.
Mr. Sakunutis,
Here.
Ms. Butler,
Here.
Mr. Sale. I don't see him, sir, and Mr. Waldman's arriving late. We currently have 5 members present.
Great, thank you. So we have a quorum. So first order of business is approval of the agenda, so can I have a motion to approve the agenda? I can. Okay, second.
Second. I'll second.
Okay, so any discussion? I want to make it just a couple. This is a good point to make a couple of comments about the agenda. So this is a joint meeting with the Historic Preservation Commission for a work session, which will begin after we finish our regular business for the Planning Commission. And so we have a couple of items on our regular business that we have to take care of for a few minutes before we start the work session. And just a couple of comments about that. So we'll have those couple of pieces of regular business that we'll take care of. And then we will adjourn the meeting and start the work session. So for people who are not familiar with Planning Commission work sessions, those are off-the-record discussions with groups that may be bringing applications to us at a later date, but these are meant to be off-the-record, frank discussions and exchange of questioning about the presentation. Then it gives us the ability to to work openly outside of our more constrained process. And as such, we don't. This was the city doc presentation was advertised as a work session, and as such, we do not accept public testimony during work sessions. And I apologize for anybody who had submitted a request to participate by giving live testimony, but that is not our process for work sessions. So we're not going to entertain any public testimony, but we hope people will understand that's it was not advertised as a public hearing, so it's not really fair for us to allow any public testimony until it's advertised that way. Anyway, but we will it'll while we adjourn, we will continue broadcasting on YouTube. So a record of the work session will be recorded on YouTube. It'll be streamed live and also recorded on YouTube to be able to look at it later. So I just wanted to set that stage, and with that discussion, all in favor of the agenda as written, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Any abstentions or nays? Okay, hearing none, the agenda is approved, and it has the one public hearing 02223 that we'll finish up and approve. And so the next order of business is approval of minutes from the October 12th, 2023 meeting. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve those as written?
Alex, I have a quick question. I know that you admitted the staff report on 02223 at the meeting, but I thought you actually admitted everything that was associated with this ordinance. So the legislative summary and everything that happened, at the September 6th Alcohol Control Board meeting, all of that is kind of comprehensively put into the record for our review.
You mean all the stuff that's in Legistar? Yes, we can do that.
I thought you did, but if you didn't, if it's not too late, it would be good to do that. I'm not
Okay, I
sure.
mean, we still have the public hearing open, so we can do it when we get to that. So I should also mention that on the meeting minutes, Ms. Butler and Mr. Sparkianudis were not present, but they have reviewed the video, and so participating by having reviewed the video from the last meeting, and per our procedures, they can vote to approve the minutes, having participated in that way. So I just wanted to mention that. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Move. Yes.
A second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions or nays? Okay, not hearing any. The minutes from the prior meeting are approved. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, Mr. Waldman has
yeah.
arrived now.
okay, great. Hello, Mr. Waldman. Just in time. Okay, so the next item of business is the continuation of the public hearing on 2223. Actually, let me share this so people can see it. Is a continuation of the public hearing on 2223 business taxes license regulation, creation of art establishment beer and wine license for the purpose of creating a city of Annapolis beer and wine license for specific art venues as authorized by Maryland Alcoholic Beverage Code 10-1002 per House Bill 353 and Senate Bill 472, signed by the governor on May 3rd, and generally related alcoholic beverages chapter of the city code. So we had a discussion about that last week, and we had nobody testify. Has anybody signed up to testify on this particular item?
Mr. Chair, no, nobody has signed up to testify.
Okay, great. Well, in that case, since we do not have any public testimony, I will now, per our process of having the public hearing span 2 meetings, I'll close the public hearing, and I'd like us to deliberate on this and come up with a recommendation for the city council on this item. One thing that I did send around were some comments. So we had one question that we had asked of staff at the last meeting was what's in the code about hours for this license to operate in any particular venue, and the particular scenario that we had talked about was something like Maryland Hall, where it potentially has art exhibits that sort of run as long as they're open. That seemed to be maybe ripe for something that wasn't intended by the legislation. So the intent is that if you're having a gallery opening in the evening and you want to serve wine or beer, you don't have to get a license for every time you do that. But if something's ongoing during the day at any particular venue, we were worried about whether that could essentially turn a place like Maryland Hall into a bar, because that they do have exhibits that you can just go look at during the day, not all the time, but sometimes. So anyway, I asked Eric to ask that to the Alcoholic Beverages Control Board and other city staff, and I sent those responses around earlier today. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at those. And I think the bottom line is that there's nothing in the code now that talks about hours, and so I think that's perhaps an item that we can talk about and use for our as part of our recommendations. So does anybody have comments? Anybody want to kick that discussion off?
Well, the way I looked at the ordinance, it seemed like the intent was to defer to the Alcohol Control Board. And if that's the case, I think we just need to make it really explicit, because right now it's not that explicit. So maybe we can make a technical amendment and do that. It sounds like staff agrees with that. So I would propose that we at least discuss that as an option.
But the way I read it, those communications is that the city council and the ordinance that authorizes this, that they could, as you say, they could amend it to make it clear to the alcohol board what the limits are. Coming up with language is not easy. I don't know that we're called upon to come up with that language, but I think that we are called upon to notice this and put the council on notice.
I would
So
agree. I
it-
think
it-
it's, yeah. Oh, go ahead, Diane. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it sounds like we're establishing this new class. And the Board of Alcohol Control Board can't actually do what it needs to do, which is comment on this new section unless we pass it, and then they can do their job and talk about what the class G hours are. As long as we're deferring back to them, I'm comfortable with that. But it seems like we have to,
Pardon me. We have the opportunity to deliver a message to the city council that in their authorizing ordinance, that they make it clear to the alcohol board what the limits should be, if any. But we've noticed this, and I think that we should communicate that to the council. And
or do an amendment or suggest an amendment to the city council on this issue. Definitely.
well, okay, I don't know if anybody's prepared to come up with that language at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not, and I think as you mentioned, Bob, it could be, pretty tricky. I think they're going to have some debate about how to craft language that meets the intent, but is not overly burdensome. You don't, I don't think we want to suggest a mother may I kind of language, but I think we need to suggest that they consider how to put some guardrails on this so it's used as intended. And so I'm comfortable with making the recommendation that they debate, get some public testimony, hear from the stakeholders, and work out the language that meets the intent without it having unintended overly broad consequences.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Teresa. I'll talk
I'm
this.
just wrapping my head around, do we envision this as a recommendation to adopt with the caveat of additional clarity about X, Y, and Z? Or are we looking as a recommendation not to adopt in absence of, this additional language because it's too vague as written? I was trying to figure out where we're leaning, so that will help guide where the conversation goes.
I thought the former of the two is what we were looking at.
Yeah, I agree. From our discussion, I think we all, first of all, we're not at liberty to say they shouldn't be able to have this Class G license because that's enabling state legislation. So it's sort of a done deal. What we're really recommending is that they make sure that when they pass the local ordinance, it has some additional guardrail on it. So, I think they have, I think we could, as David said, leading to the former, that we all think this is a good thing. We just have to make sure that they put some guardrails on it.
So I had a board meeting with the Indianapolis Summer Garden Theater the other day. And of course, alcohol came up really a lot because we're doing Escape to Margaritaville next year. And there's a big debate on, Do we want this to be a big drunken fest or do we want this to be a show? And the theater said, we're doing a show because it's not safe for us to have alcohol during our performances because of the logistics of the rocks on the ground and the seats the way they are, and just a lot of different issues like that that aren't in place yet. That being said, there was a discussion because a number of years ago, we had an ordinance that came to us like this, and it was for the Shakespeare Company. And I thought we had given our thoughts at that point on that ordinance. Now, from what I understand, the Classic Theater of Maryland on West Street already has a license that they only pay $200 a year or so for. What do they have if they don't already have? They have a year license that's a whole year long, but it's only like $200. So, are we really putting new legislation, or are we just bumping up to $1,000 a year? And I guess that's a question for Eric. But maybe not.
I'm here. I mean, I'm not familiar with the licenses that exist, but I do know I'm not aware of an annual license that a nonprofit institution can apply for. I mean, I know that at Maryland Hall, for example, they apply for 100 different permits a year for different events. But that's just one example.
Yeah, it came to us as from the Shakespeare Company, which is now the Classic Theater of Maryland, and it came to us as a planning commission a number of years ago. And I thought they had put together some kind of, for some reason, and everybody seems to believe in the leadership of the Summer Garden Theater that they're only paying $250 a year with an unlimited license with the full bar. And that's not just beer and wine; that's a full bar.
I don't think that's accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible that they tried and just didn't get it adopted, but I don't think that's accurate from what I've heard.
Okay. They're just probably a standing bar now.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe they created an actual venue, a separate establishment, maybe operating under a different permit.
Okay.
Okay. I'm ready to make a motion. Are we ready to hear it? Hello?
For it.
Sure. You don't have to wait for us.
All right, 2 sentences. The PC Planning Commission has noticed that a Class G license could lead to the sale of alcohol beyond the time of artistic performances or exhibitions. Nice way of putting it, I hope. The Planning Commission strongly suggests.
Go for it.
Excuse me?
Sure.
The Planning Commission strongly suggests to the City Council that the enabling ordinance be amended to reasonably limit the sale of alcohol to performances and exhibition openings. I mean, we've noticed, as Mr. Pline pointed out, there's galleries at the Maryland Hall that are open during the time that the building is open generally. Whereas, well, what's contemplated is at an exhibition opening that there's a party and that there's the service of alcohol. But anyway, that sort of complies with our duties, and I guess there'd be a third sentence, which is that with these caveats, the Planning Commission recommends approval of 2223 or whatever it is.
So,
2 sentences. We've noticed that the Class G license could lead.
I will second that
Okay.
discussion.
I like the idea of bumping it back to the quote experts on the Annapolis Alcohol Beverage and Control Board. And in line 33 through 35 on page 3, it says the license holder is authorized to sell or serve beer and wine at retail for on-premises consumption during the hours and days set for beer and light wine licenses by the City of Annapolis Alcohol Beverage and Control Board. I don't really know if we want to step on their toes. They're
Well,
they know that.
The Alcohol Control Board is notably generous. And we've noticed that this thing could lead to some abuse. probably not by Maryland Hall, but there may be some, actors in town who qualify as whatever they call what I forgot what it's called.
Arts establishment. Yeah.
Right, that would qualify for this kind of a license and who could abuse it. So if the city council says to the alcohol board, you can issue Class G licenses with these limits.
And tell me the limits again, Bob.
Well, I'm not saying any specific limits, 2 hours before and 2 hours after. I mean, I'm not saying anything specific.
You said specifically openings or performances. So
Well,
that isn't,
Limited.
and I think that limits it a little bit because should be other special events too.
The people that are actually, so let's say there's folks that teaching photography and they have, they're giving classes at their facility, and then they're doing, I mean, it's really not an opening or performance, but it's potentially in the, I don't know, in the process of what they're doing, they have alcohol. Are we trying to prohibit that?
I think based on our last discussion, the intention of this draft as we see it is that they were trying to limit the multiple requests for alcohol license for multiple events, right? So 100 events a year, restrict it down to just a blanket, a permit, and allow them to have the events. But the way it's written, it in essence allows for the 100% availability of alcohol at these locations, assuming they're within the, the art criteria or foundation, or no, I'm sorry, the nonprofit with arts. So I think what we're trying to do is put some limitations on active or activity or engagement or some sort of something that's happening that would warrant the sale of alcohol within the initial intention, which was events and activities, versus doors open, alcohol is available for all hours that this establishment is open.
I agree with you with maybe one clarification. I absolutely, yes, part of it is having it available for these different events and everything else. But I think and not having people have to get these alcohol licenses all the time. But the real intent was, from what I understand, the stronger intent was to help support financially these organizations.
Mhm.
And that's what it was for this Shakespeare company when it came to us, was financial thing. That being said, what I'm saying is, should we allow these art establishments to have it for not just to open the doors, but have it for special events? Let's say it's a volunteer day or or an open house, or just come see, do something at the theater or wherever it is, the gallery. Is it that sort of thing as well? Are we limiting it by saying openings and performances?
So I don't,
if I had a karaoke night at the Summer Garden Theater, would that be considered a performance? For me saying it's not a performance, but for other people saying it might be a performance. But what is that? Would that be included? Like, let's say we did that for the community, to have them come in and do and sing and dance on stage. Is that a performance?
And I think there's clarity either way, right? Because in essence, this blanket permit would allow them to act as a lounge pretty much the entire time.
Yeah, what I think,
sip and paint places too.
well, so if I can interrupt here,
Sorry.
I think what this discussion tells me is there's a lot of water to go under this bridge here. There needs to be a lot more discussion with stakeholders, and we're not having just done this for 2 meetings here. We clearly are not in that position to define any of these terms or be really specific. Nor really is that is that necessarily our job here. But I think this discussion shows that there's a lot of debate to be had as to what should be, what the limits on this should be. And so I think as we talked about earlier, just in our recommendation saying, we recommend 02223, but that the city council and the alcoholic beverage control board get more input to define where the limits are on types of events and hours of types of I don't know if event's the right word, but
Activities.
types of activities and hours of said activities needs to be flushed out. I mean, I think that's as specific as we should get.
I
Yeah, when I was
agree.
looking at the email string, it was just kind of like, oh, it's just a makes sense, common sense, common sense. And I'm like, I don't think you were looking at every side of it.
Yeah.
You just really have to, do your due diligence.
Right, I think one thing that was important was in the staff report. It says there remain some questions regarding exactly which organizations would be eligible to apply for this new license. So implementation of this legislation should include time to ensure that both staff and public clearly understand which organizations are and are not eligible to apply. And I would add to that, and what hours are appropriate.
Activities and hours, yeah, are appropriate.
Right. So if we can clarify that, I think it should go forward, but we just need to say that in the
Yeah.
recommendation.
Careful with the hours. You have to be careful with the hours part because, some of these places like Maryland Hall will have a matinee show. So just be careful with that.
Okay, so if I could share a screen. I don't know how to do that. Wait a minute, where do I share screen?
Down at the bottom.
Share screen. Okay, let's see what happens. Well, I'm not getting it. Share. Okay, sorry, I'm sorry. Okay, can you see it? Can you see it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yep, the planning commission has noticed. Yep.
Where did I get this?
Be a little nitpicky here.
Is what?
Just, I don't want to be nitpicky here.
Okay,
Just, but when you say of the times of performance to special events and exhibition openings, I don't know, people might say the time for this event 7 to 9. So that's all, the only way you can have is between 7 and 9. Got to have it a little earlier than that with buffers,
right, but I don't want to get into the detail.
Yeah, the intent.
And I just think that we're saying to the council, you need to look at this.
Mhm.
You need to tell the alcohol board what to do. They need to look at it. I don't think it's on us to write this amendment.
Agreed. We're not equipped to do that at this point without
All right,
much public testimony.
so I'll restate my motion. I move that we recommend approval with this statement added.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I think I like the, oh, sorry.
Chairman, just for a point of order, the initial motion by Mr. Waldman was seconded by Mr. Imes.
Oh,
So
sorry.
that's on the floor.
Okay.
I think you amended it, I thought, or you withdrew it. And
You wanna
are
withdraw
withdrawing,
that?
Bob?
Excuse me? Am I what?
Are you withdrawing the original one? And you're amending it? Is what
Yeah,
you're
I'll
saying.
withdraw the original one, Ms. Consoli.
Thank you.
Okay.
All
And
right.
I'll
So
second
you,
this.
Glad-
I'll second
Okay.
this one, or I think Diane already did, didn't she?
No. I still think we should defer to what I consider the experts, our sister board, the alcohol control board, and let them make any prohibitions or restrictions.
So you should think it should be the planning commission, strongly just the city council in coordination with the alcohol board.
Right, because
He'll do it.
in this case, we're basically just saying we want city council to decide. And I think they really do need to rely on the board, the alcohol control board, because they really do have some experience and expertise in this area.
Well, then in their hearings on the ordinance, then they should call in people from the board and ask them what they think.
You mean when city council meets?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's before the rules committee and they should have, they should bring in the alcohol board and say, what do you think about this?
Well, the
Or-
board
and-
met on
and
September
let-
6th
and
and
let the-
approved it.
Huh?
The alcohol control board met on September 6th and approved it. So that recommendation has already gone forward.
All right, well, but the city council has yet to vote.
And rules, you're right, it's going to rule. So I think it was Cynthia, is it Reuter or Reuter? Can't pronounce it right. One of her suggestions was that we basically do a technical amendment and make it clear that it goes to that it's the purview of the alcohol control board to come up with the times and dates and hours, or I guess hours and days for this license.
Well, I let them wrangle it out. At this point, all we're doing is we've taken a look at this. We've noticed that this is a potential problem. And we're just recommending to the city council that they work it out. So I'm gonna call for the vote.
All in favor of this as written, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
With the comment that I think it goes to the alcohol control board
Right.
consideration.
One vote against.
City council
Okay.
has to city council should seek guidance from that board, which is the board that is tasked with doing this kind of thing.
Right.
You said, Diane, you said that they met and they approved it, the alcohol board,
They did.
but they didn't
September
give any
6th.
guideline, but they didn't give any specifics of time or anything of that nature when they met?
No, not in their meeting, because they can't yet, because we haven't done what we need to do. Once we pass this, then it can go back to them, according to the comments that we got from the Office of Law, and then they can set the time.
No, it goes to the
Limitations and any
council. It
restrictions.
goes to the council. And the council has to decide on the ordinance and then the alcohol board acts. And it's the council that can say to the board, here are the parameters of a Class G license. So all we're doing, it's got to go to the council before the alcohol board can set any regulations, but they could certainly go testify at a hearing.
Yes, and hopefully they will.
Okay, so that's that.
All right, so we had a vote of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yay and 1 nay as written.
Yes.
Okay, can you record that, Kimberly?
I beg your pardon. What was your question?
Oh, can you've got that vote?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Bob, if you want to send that over, I will put that on letterhead and get that sent in officially.
Okay. Done. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you all. So next order of business, we have old business, no old business, new business. Is there anything to discuss under new business? That's
Yes,
not
I would like to.
Okay.
I would like to bring up something actually has to do with the Alcohol Beverage Control Board. I received a notice from a law firm that said that the owners of the Taylor Avenue Park Place Hotel, which is being built, are applying for a liquor license. And I received the letter because I guess I'm within some sort of proximity to the application. And they're asking for a 7-day, 6 a.m. to midnight on sale license and a 7-day-a-week off sale license. I don't know what what off sale means. I don't know if it means they can simply sell it to somebody who takes a bottle to their room, or does it mean it's a liquor store? I don't know. All I know, I'm asking the commission, each of you individually, what your recollection is of the promises and assertions made by the hotel applicant as to whether there was going to be a restaurant, a bar, a banquet facility, or conference rooms. I mean, I know what my recollection is. And I recall that the plans themselves didn't show anything about a bar or a cafe or a restaurant or banquet or conference facilities. And we approved the application based upon those plans. And I just want to know if anybody has a recollection of what the applicant said with reference to going beyond a simple breakfast buffet. I'd like to know that. If anybody
You know,
has a
Bob,
recollection.
Yeah, I actually reviewed my notes from the work session we had on September 5th, 2019. And I don't have any specific notes on that, but I know we obviously heard it for more than one meeting after that work session. And I was curious if I knew the dates of the other hearings on that, I might be able to pull up my notes and find some more information, but I don't off the top of my head recollect
Okay,
anything other than some of the real big, the other issues.
I can put in a request to staff to provide us with the dates, and I will be happy to provide everybody with those dates.
So I did a little research on that this morning, and I have sent that around via email. The dates were July 22nd, 2020 and August 26th, 2020 were the two meetings that we had public hearings on that.
August 26th, excuse me?
Yes. And I sent the meeting minutes around in that email
Uh-huh.
with the two links for the YouTube video. So you can go back and watch. And I actually skimmed through them, and I found, the part of the discussion where the applicant talked about a limited services hotel. And it didn't really say much beyond limited services, but you look at the site plans, it has the breakfast, food prep and breakfast area. But there's, as you said, I have a recollection that we discussed a limited, what the definition of a limited service hotel was, that it had no conference facilities. Everything in the hotel was for the benefit of the guests and not for people who were not guests. So they weren't, you didn't have something that people came just to the hotel for something that wasn't related to staying there. And that discussion came up mostly around traffic, because that was the concern that, a conference thing would just bring a lot of people in just to go to that. And that a limited services hotel doesn't create a lot of traffic because it's not that kind of thing. So there was discussion of that by the applicant, but specifically, beyond the design, the floor layout that talked about a breakfast bar and food prep, there was nothing specific about anything more than that.
All right, I'll take a look.
Also, to add to that, I would say that another thing, they really stressed the fact that it was a limited services hotel because there was a need for it in this town of something that was a little less expensive. And it was going to be very much stripped down. There wasn't going to be much of anything except for the breakfast buffet, from what you said. And it was for people, coming to the game or coming to events in the city. And we talked about, downtown versus everything on Riva Road, and we needed something closer in town.
But that said, I'm sure we've all stayed in limited service hotels. Most of them have, a cooler by the front desk that you can get a Coke or a beer and take it up to your room. Many of them have mini bars. You take a couple, you take a vodka and tonic out of the bar and they charge you. I don't know if that's.
I think that's what the offsite is, that you can take it up to your room, or you can,
and many of them do have, where the breakfast buffet is, maybe they have a bartender that, that'll pour you a beer while you're just sitting and relaxing after whatever you did in town before you go up to your room.
Or they have the
That's not
flexibility to
uncommon,
have a wine happy hour where they give you a glass of wine every day or something like that,
I don't
but
know.
you have a lot of those things. And sometimes there's not even a seating area. It's just the lobby, and that's
Yeah,
it.
exactly. But to Bob's point, this is just speculation on my part. I said what I heard, and I don't know. I don't know that I don't have anything else to say other than
Yeah.
to answer Bob's question.
So for me, this was before my time,
one-
so obviously I don't have any recollection. I wasn't a part of the discussions or the working sessions. But I did review all the information that Alex sent over. And there isn't anything that explicitly calls out as restaurant or bar. But at the same token, you know, most of these hotels, as Alex mentioned, will have some sort of convenience factor that includes alcohol sales for the consumption on premise, or off, because there's nothing stopping for me like a guest buying a bottle of wine on my way out. You know, there's nothing stopping that. But I guess where my question is in this exercise we're doing here is the assumption that this hotel would not have any alcohol at all when it was built. Is that what the
My,
assumption
talking
was
about
based on
alcohol.
plans?
my recollection is that they made it pretty clear that there was not going to be a restaurant and not and a bar, that there was only going to be a breakfast buffet and none of the other things which attract people to the hotel. And now
Well,
the application is being made by not only the owners of the hotel, but now by an allied group called something Dual Brands Cafe LLC, and the couple of people's names connected with that. And so what irks me is that we approved something under promises or assertions or guarantees or however you want to call it. And now they're trying to change it. And so we did not have a discussion about perhaps how the presence of a bar could affect the surrounding neighborhoods. You know, we did not have a discussion about where in the building that might be. We did not have a discussion about traffic and so forth. So that's what irks me. It's not the fact that they want to have something like that, but they should have said it up front.
Yeah, and that's the lesson that we learn all the time is we can't just go by assertions and promises because they'll always work around them unless it's put in writing. However, that being said, you know, whether they get an alcohol license or everything is not our purview anyways, but it does make sense, you know, to know it doesn't fit in with the community or not if they had this planned.
Right.
And you're absolutely right there.
Well,
if
so-
there's any response, it'll be made over my name only, not under the commission's name. It'll be solely because I've noticed this. Okay, so don't.
Well, I mean, that
asking
said,
for recollections, and I appreciate your having found the history of this.
I'd like to
but
review it. I
that
haven't seen it.
said, you know, I mean, as a commission, if we wanted to put together a statement to go make testimony in front of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board for this application, if we feel strongly to make a statement that represents the what we heard, you know, we certainly can do that.
Well, we could, except that the hearing is November the 1st, and we don't have a lot of time for that. So I don't know how quickly we can act on that. At any rate, I've asked for your recollections, and I have a fairly clear idea of what happened. And I will look at the link at the YouTubes myself.
Okay.
Because I'm
So no, you're not trying to make a motion to
no,
have a statement by us. Okay, well then.
that's totally up to
been a
you
good
all.
discussion.
You want to make a session, if you want to make a statement, go right ahead, but I didn't ask for that. I just asked for recollections.
Okay, good. Well, you get your answer?
Yes, thank you. Okay.
All righty. Okay, so going on, we have communications and I have nothing further to say, which brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is adjournment. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Is there a work session on the city dock tonight?
Yes, so it's after we
after the
adjourn. So
adjournment.
you missed the preamble,
Okay,
Bob, but
Sorry.
yeah, so just for anybody who's watching, we're going to adjourn our regular meeting, then bring the HPC folks in and then have the work session. So anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for our regular business. So at this point, Madeline, if we could bring all of the HPC folks up into the foreground. And,
Would you-
and
Real quick, would you like to stay live or do you want to go off the live stream?
no, we want to stay live. Yeah.
Okay, great. I
For-
will
for the-
promote HPC.
And obviously the presenters too from the city doc.
Okay, I will do them all right now.
Yep, great.
And Alex, if you can provide what a reminder of a working session.
Yeah, I will do that again. So while all of the HPC folks and the presenters are coming on, just as a reminder, a work session is an off-the-record discussion between a group that wants to make a presentation to us, and it's an opportunity for us to have some frank discussion and ask questions that are all off the record. And I'll remind both the folks who are making the presentation and the public that anything we say should not be taken as any tacit approval of anything that's presented to us. This is strictly just a forum for exchange of information on what we assume at some point will be some sort of an application that will come forward to us. But it doesn't, anything we say or about it, is not any implicit endorsement or lack thereof. So I just wanted the public to know that those are the conditions of the work session, and that reiterate that we're not taking any public comment because it was not advertised as a public hearing. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Acting Chair Bobby Collins of the Historic Preservation Commission to introduce her folks, and then after that, then we can get into the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Pline. Thank you for inviting us to join you for this presentation. I'm looking at all these little boxes on my screen. What I'm going to do is call out the names I see first, and then see if there's anybody who might not be listed correctly or is lurking in the background. But from our committee, I show Will Scott is present. Yes. Okay.
Hello.
I show Leslie Xavier. I show Kimberly Golder, our newest commissioner. And the people I don't see, let me just check to see if they're there, is Kim Finch on? Okay, how about Bill Williams? And Kevin Smith? I don't
Hey,
see,
Bobby,
but
I'm
they
here.
may be joining us in a few minutes, so. But thank you for having us, and we're ready to hear the presentation.
All right, thank you, Bobby. Well, welcome aboard to our meeting, all of the HPC folks. And so at this point, I will turn it over to Eileen Fogarty. I guess you're going to be the master of ceremonies here, and you'll introduce. I also see the mayor. I would imagine you'll turn it over to him for comments, or anyway. So take it away, Eileen. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we are so delighted to have both the HPC and the Planning Commission together tonight to share the progress that has been made on this amazing City Dock Resiliency Project. But as importantly, or more importantly, is to hear your ideas and your direction. This evening, we have a group of both partners, our own staff and the private sector staff that will be presenting to you. Burr Vogel, who is leading this entire effort to get it built and to get it built early. He's our Public Works Director. From the U.S. Naval Academy, Zoe Johnson. She's the Navy's Community Liaison. From Mahan Reichel, James Sink. Bryce Turner from BCT Architects. Matt Fleming may be able to join us this evening. He is Director of the Resiliency Authority. And before we get into our presentation, excuse me, Mayor Buckley has asked to say a couple of words to you. Mayor Buckley? Can we hear the mayor?
No, he's muted himself. There he goes.
Gavin, can you hear us? We are waiting for you if you can unmute.
He's just not talking, is he?
Now, wait, what politician doesn't talk when he has an audience?
Exactly.
But he looks unmuted.
Yeah,
Gavin,
he looks
you
like-
unmuted? Okay. I am going to try and call the mayor.
Sure you have the right microphone selected, Gavin, would be that. When you hit near the mute button.
Gavin, can you unmute? I'm going to make one more effort, and that is to call Kate and see if Kate can get the mayor unmuted. And then the other person might be Burr. Burr, do you want to call the mayor? Because you know how to do this.
I don't know how to fix a Zoom technical issue, Eileen.
It doesn't look like he's muted. It looks like he just might have the wrong microphone.
Okay,
chosen.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Are you able to get on? I've got the mayor. Are you able to get on the screen, or should I just put my speaker up for everyone to hear you?
Give me a little time and I'll work it out. I don't know what's going on with this laptop.
Okay, I'm gonna, okay, what we'll do, Gavin, is as soon as you're ready to talk, we will stop whatever we're doing and we will go to you. Okay? Okay, bye-bye. So we are going to proceed, and the mayor is or is not going to be able to resolve the computer problems, but he will call us or show up and we will put him back on when that happens. So with that said, let's put the presentation up and go to the first slide. Does Madeline have the presentation? Yes. I have great confidence in Madeline. A second slide, please. So this evening, what we would like to share, you all know the tremendous success we've had with Hillman Garage coming in ahead of schedule. But at the same time that was happening, Burr Vogel was coordinating intensely with the Naval Academy and the Resiliency Authority to bring forward a completely integrated resilient system. The City Dock Park design, we received dozens and dozens of comments this winter and spring. And so what you will see now is the incorporation of all those comments in the final design. And you will see really what is the kickoff for the Maritime Welcome Center and the Prince George Street conceptual designs. Again, both very early, very conceptual, and we need your thoughts and directions. Burr, next slide.
Okay, as Eileen said, really thrilled with the success of the partnership between the design team, our construction contractor, Whiting Turner, and the entire city staff on Hillman Garage. So we're looking forward to keeping that momentum going forward into the City Dock portion of the project. And next. As Eileen mentioned, we have a fantastic working relationship with the Naval Academy and their engineering team. as well as their facilities leadership. So turn the mic over now to Zoe Johnson to talk a little bit about the Naval Academy's resilience efforts.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Planning Commission and Historic Preservation Commission. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Zoe Johnson. As Eileen said, I'm the Community Planning Liaison Officer for Naval Support Activity Annapolis. We refer to it as NSA Annapolis, and we are the owners and land managers on behalf of our tenant base command, the U.S. Naval Academy. So we do all the construction and real estate and management and security for the facility. And we also lead the planning efforts on sea level rise and coastal flooding and resilience. So it's a pleasure to give you some comments, in support of the phase of the City Dock plan that you're going to see tonight in terms of the redevelopment plans. As you obviously know, we share a boundary on King George and Prince George, as well as, are both situated, at the mouth of the Severn River and Spot Creek. But we also share the same vulnerabilities when it comes to planning for sea level rise and coastal flooding and storm surge, as well as stormwater flooding and other hazards associated with climate change, such as, extreme heat. And so we're both working on those issues. We have been over the last, I've been with the installation for 5 years, and I've been working the entire time with the city to move both the Academy's plans forward, as well as support the city's plans. To that end, the city sits on the Academy. Members of the Public Works, Burr Vogel Department, and others sit on the Academy Sea Level Rise Advisory Council. And I was an active participant on the City Dock Action Committee's resilience team. And the reason we work so closely is that we want to ensure we're using the same science and information, and that our plans are cohesive and integrated. So in 2022, the installation released its resiliency plan, and it follows, a number of the same design principles that are been incorporated into the City Dock plan that you're going to see tonight. Both plans were informed by the latest sea level rise science. Both plans address nuisance flooding, coastal flooding, as well as stormwater management. Both plans utilize what's called a defense in depth approach, where you use multiple layers of defense to protect against those impacts, so not just one mean or method. Both plans incorporate both green infrastructure, sort of natural solutions to addressing hazards, increasing tree canopy and natural solutions, as well as gray, sort of the more built infrastructure approaches. Both plans also take into account the ability to raise elevation or increase elevation over time to account for future increases in sea level. There's one difference, is that the Academy's plan looked out to the year 2100 and really laid out a plan for protecting, putting projects in place between now and all the way out to 2065 in terms of a planning horizon. The cities is sort of more focused in on immediate actions to address impacts between now and 2050. And Burr will talk a little bit more about that later. But and as I mentioned, both plans had that community engagement where we were working very closely together to make sure our plans are aligned. Following the release of our plan and sort of as the City Dock's plan, we're still working very closely. We actually meet once a month. We are working through a lot of the finer details. We have a number of projects in design right now, including a flood wall along Prince George Street and a stormwater project there at Gate 1. And we have 2 meetings next week, and a third meeting the next week, where we're working out the finer details about how our proposed flood wall will tie in ultimately with the City Dock's flood wall there at the end of Prince George Street, as well as some of the finer details associated with the location and design of the electrical and a generator room there on Prince George. So more to come on that, but we're really confident we can work through those issues and that we can align our plans. And we have been strong supporters in advancing this collective and community approach to addressing sea level rise and coastal flooding, because we obviously we share a water boundary and we share the impacts, and we want to share the solution set moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Eileen.
To Burr.
Oh, to Burr, sorry.
Thanks, Zoe. Next slide, please. Just a brief recap of where we are on our flood protection efforts. We are going to protect to an elevation 8. That's about 1.5 feet higher than Hurricane Isabel, but accounting for sea level rise between 2003 and our target design date of 2060. We're getting that Isabel level of protection for the next 40 years. And then also our tidal flood protection, our flood barriers, and raising of the elevation of the land. It starts at Gate 0 with the Naval Academy at Prince George Street, goes all the way along the waterfront, and will ultimately tie in around the Annapolis Waterfront Hotel at the Fleet Reserve. So that's kind of the scope of our flood protection efforts for tidal flooding. And then the stormwater management covers everything upland of that, all the water that would drain to those areas. Next slide, please. So here's our current construction schedule. We are looking to start in the spring, probably the March, April timeframe, with essentially prep work to install new electrical systems and distribution to the waterfront, and so that we can demolish all of the existing electrical in the Harbor Master building, the birdhouse, and then some of the electrical panels that sit right along the water. So we'll create new electrical distribution at Prince George Street. Then we'll be ready to install or to demolish the existing and start constructing the park in the fall of 2024. So that is our main phase of effort. Starts about 12 months from now, after the 24 boat show, and we'll wrap up before the 25 boat show. Our last and final phase there will be the deployable flood barriers and our storm drain work to kind of finish up the project. Next slide. Budget update since the last time we talked. The project has grown a little bit in cost as we've added some, I think, some very important items. One of them is to bring some of the overhead electrical lines underground from the Harbor Master building up to Dock Street, up Pinckney Street to the Shiplap House. And then we're going to be putting the flood barriers on the compromised, the south side of Eagle Alley. We'll be putting that flood protection system right at the waterfront. So all told, we're looking at about an $85 million project, and we're pretty close on funding, provided that we get approval from FEMA for a $32 million grant. Next slide. That's back to you, Eileen.
This is the mayor. Mr. Mayor, can you join us now? Because this is your slide.
All right, thank you so much. Sorry about the technical difficulties. It's an honor to be with you. And firstly, thank you for all the work you do and all the volunteer hours that you put into this job. You clearly love your city, so thank you. We are on the cusp of something historic. We're on the cusp of something beautiful. And I believe we all pretty much want the same thing. I don't think there is a lot of difference between what any of us want for City Dock. We clearly all believe that there's a better use for the waterfront than a parking lot. We all know the water is coming. We know the water is heating up and the water is rising. We just saw it in the boat show. On Saturday, the boat show flooded, right? 2 weeks before that, I was down on the waterfront with the governor. City Dock flooded again. We don't really have a choice here. We have to act. and we have to come together on it, because every day we wait is another vulnerability for the city. This is going to be something beautiful. It already is getting national attention. I speak at mayors' conferences. I speak on panels about how we've come together to work through this project and protect our city, our business district, our historic district, and how we partner with the Naval Academy. Tonight you'll see the park. You know a lot about it already. Tonight you'll see a waterfront welcome center. That waterfront welcome center has lots of revisions ahead of it, but you have to start somewhere. I want to point out we're removing 2,200 square feet of building. That is the harbor master, the visitors kiosk, and the utility building. And then we are replacing it with, as it stands now, about 1,900 or 1,800 square foot, a reduction in the volume of building. Now, I'm not allowing for the stairs and the elevator, which we'll share with the Bertis House and we'll connect to the Bertis House with. And then on top of that, if you stand on the Market House side of the Harbour Master's office and you look at it, you look at the kiosk, that's 44 feet of obstruction of your view to the water. Stand in the on the Market House side of the utility building where those trash cans are in the middle of the parking lot. It's 25 feet of obstruction. That's nearly 70 feet of obstruction that were approved and supported in some fashion before any of us. So, you know, I want us to work together because we are doing something amazing here that the rest of the country is looking at. This project is going to be of national significance. And it wouldn't have been possible without all of us coming together. Like I said, our differences are minute compared to the things that we all agree on. And so I urge you to, you know, work with us on this. Give us your input. We'll put that input into the design. We've already put a lot of that. This process has had a historic amount of meetings to move it forward. It wouldn't have been possible without the City Dock Action Committee. So I'm so excited to be at this stage with you all, looking forward to our next meeting, and looking forward to one day, you know, being in that park or standing on the balcony of a waterfront welcome center, and raising a glass to everybody's effort that's got us to this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Next slide, please. We will be sharing in the next several slides the new, or I should say the detailed City Dock Park. And what you'll see is the comments, the Planning Commission, the HPC, all of the teams on the City Dock Action Committee, the residents, businesses, our stakeholders have all been, or almost all been, woven into we call it the fabric of the park. Most importantly, Annapolis's cultural legacy is woven into the park design itself. Next slide, please. This is Chris Haley's slide, and Chris was not able to join us tonight, but he is so impassioned and he has led the effort for the really celebrating and honoring our complex and diverse legacy. And Chris has been adamant about including all groups, Jewish, Indigenous, African-American, Greek, all of the peoples who landed here and who then went on, in many cases, to prosper through their industriousness. Those are the themes that Chris and his team are bringing to the City Dock Park. With that, let's go to James Sink for a discussion of how the cultural legacy is being incorporated. Next slide.
Yes, thank you, Eileen. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
All right. One of the things Chris always points out when he shares his piece on this is that there was a moment during the process of the City Dock Action Committee where it was thought that cultural legacy would have to be implemented and interpreted in a singular moment as part of this project, as part of this park. And what the point we've come to is actually a cultural legacy fabric, as Eileen referenced, that is spread throughout the park. And we think this is going to allow the park to engage people of all different backgrounds and of all different ages on various levels. And so we're going to get into that in a little more detail now on the next slide. So we start here at the end of Ego Alley at what we're calling Alex Haley Plaza. And this is the location where the Alex Haley statue will be moved about 15 to 20 feet from where he sits today, there at the number 4 in that top right image. And the story wall will be preserved along Compromise Street. So it's at this point where really the experience of cultural legacy at City Dock begins, and Alex Haley's vision for reconciliation, healing, and honoring cultural heritage of all people will continue to set the tone for how people experience cultural legacy in the park. Next slide, please. Next to Alex Haley Plaza is the new tree-lined promenade, which will include a timeline recognizing the arrivals as well as important events in the history of various groups of people that have called Annapolis home. The beginning and the end of the timeline will be marked with signage similar to the photos on the right-hand side. And there's also some images there of what in-ground timelines and interpretive panels might look like as we've seen them installed on other projects. Next slide, please. In Dock Street Park, we think there's an opportunity to be very bold and celebratory with our attitude towards the way cultural legacy is incorporated. The grade change in the walls to afford that grade change at the elevated lawn of Dock Street Park provides us a tapestry to put quotes and other graphics related to cultural legacy, as seen in some of those images. And then central to the park is the interactive fountain. And this is where we're going to feature the city's connection with water. It's, as we all know, it's really the reason for the city's existence. So in this interactive fountain, people are going to literally experience water by playing and touching it, but also figuratively through the graphics and imagery incorporated on the low walls surrounding the fountain, as well as in the pavement, where we think there's potential for scenes of industrious life on the bay, showing various flora and fauna of the bay, also the potential for maps that identify the important waterways in and around Annapolis. Next slide, please. The terminus of City Dock, as we all know, is Susan Campbell Park, and we're proposing that it be anchored by a commissioned piece of sculpture, which might interpret Annapolis's relationship with water and with wind. It just has a couple ideas, obviously, for an artist to propose. And to the north of Susan Campbell Park is the new Maritime Welcome Center and Bertus House, which you'll be hearing more about here shortly. These facilities will serve as a gateway to the bay, and the adjoining Pocket Park will have the opportunity for related historic and interpretive elements to be shown in those locations with the 4 and the 3, which there's some images of interpretive elements and scenes of life on the water in Annapolis there in the top right. Next slide, please. So what we're hoping is that by incorporating this fabric of cultural legacy throughout the park, it will make it a place that is welcoming to and enjoyed by all types of people. The bird's eye view here shows how the various components of the park will be coming together, beginning with the active park there in the foreground. This is the place that we really think is going to serve as residents of Annapolis's outdoor living room. There's going to be game tables in that shaded grove, interactive seating elements that kids can climb on while their parents sit nearby, and swings overlooking Ego Alley. Next to that, you climb up a couple feet of grade change to Dock Street Park lawn, and then you get to the central interactive fountain. The interactive fountain is separated from Susan Campbell Park by a raised stage and pergola. And on the north side of the park, I think something that we've heard a lot of positivity towards and really a mandate to incorporate is this pedestrian street, which is going to connect the downtown to the future Maritime Welcome Center. Next slide, please. So over the years, we've worked with the City Dock Action Committee, various citizen groups. We've met with you all multiple times to understand how people are going to use the new City Dock. And we believe there's going to be something for everyone here. Next slide, please. First, there will be the daily and impromptu activities that are shown in this diagram. There's going to be opportunities for neighbors to come play ping pong in the active park, picnicking and playing cornhole on the expansive lawn, families enjoying the interactive fountain, as well as small bands being able to play on the stage to either the east or the west, people hopefully enjoying those bands and dancing in the Fountain Plaza. Waterfront yoga programming to continue there in Susan Campbell Park. The pedestrian street will have the ability to host food vendors, food trucks, to really help activate the park on a more frequent basis. And watermen will be able to land their craft at the Maritime Welcome Center and share their goods. Finally, a new kayak launch is proposed as part of Gateway Park and the programming in the Maritime Welcome Center. Next slide, please. So large festivals and events like the boat show, which just occurred, will continue to take place and hopefully thrive at the new City Dock. They'll be accommodated as shown in the diagram here. The Singer-Songwriters Festival will be able to continue to set up its temporary stage in the Dock Street parking lot, at which point we'll be able to clear out the movable furnishings in the active park for festival goers. The air show associated with commencement will have prime viewing from the elevated lawn. The Kunta Kinte Festival and the St. Patrick's Day events will be able to spread out throughout the park and host activities here. And the option for a summer concert series, outdoor theater, a movie night can all be accommodated in that stage, which can go, like I said, to the east or to the west. And as we all know, this is going to really be a prime location for looking at fireworks on the 4th of July. And the next slide, please. So to close out this portion of the presentation, we wanted to, again, share some of these vignettes that we think are really important in helping understand the human experience in the park. So this is a view inside the planter grove of the active park. You see the game tables and the swings in the background that overlook Ego Alley, tables and umbrellas up at the border of the Dock Street Park lawn. Next slide, please. Here we see the interactive fountain with the stage and the pergola in the background. You can see it has a generous scale to it. It's going to be able to be enjoyed by a lot of people and right there in proximity to the water. Next slide, please. Finally, a view looking west along the Eagle Alley Promenade. Eagle Alley there to the left, and also on the right-hand side, you see one of those portals or ramps that gets you from the promenade up to the Dock Street Park lawn. And it's at these gateway points where we like to use the walls to identify some of those obviously entering the park and interpretive elements that we spoke about earlier. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to Eileen. Just going to touch on some of the process that we've been through.
Next slide, please. Thanks so much, James. You know, when you look at how we got here, I would like the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission to sort of step back and say, we did it right. We got here through an extremely rigorous planning process. As a planning director for way too many years, I am just so proud. This started with a plan, and it was a consensus plan. We had elements like the conceptual City Dock Park that there was lots of input and feedback on, which then evolved into a more detailed City Dock Park. There was an ordinance 01523, which the Planning Commission and the Council adopted to proceed with the Welcome Center. And now this evening, you have the early conceptual design plans for that Welcome Center. Other groups have seen it, the City Dock Action Committee design team, the City Dock Action Committee, the City Council. But this is just the beginning of the next phase of our planning process with broad-based community outreach. Next slide, please. Perhaps what is most significant about the Maritime Welcome Center is in our City Dock Action Plan, in our Maritime Zoning Strategy of 2021, over and over, we have said as goals and objectives that we will unlock water access for all Annapolitans. This, a welcoming maritime center, does that. It makes those plans a reality. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Bryce Turner from BCT Architects.
Thank you, Eileen. So I really want to introduce you to the Maritime Welcome Center here. There are a number of, first of all, I'd like to say it's good to see you all. I hope we can all meet in person, actually.
Hold on a second.
Maybe next time. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I'm good.
So the activities that that really need to be accommodated here at the Maritime Welcome Center is obviously a visitor's function that Visit Annapolis will take care of, and an important function that is the harbor master, of course, functionally very important to control the traffic here in the harbor in Eagle Alley. As well as the opportunity to have some cultural and legacy types of exhibits, maybe a museum. We don't know exactly what all this program will be just yet, but in Burtis and the Maritime Welcome Center, those will be important activities that can happen, along with also some opportunities to access the water. We know how important that is. It's been repeated many times, but it is important. You know, with private land bordering our waterways, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to access the water for fishing, paddleboarding, kayaking, etc. And we know there's a lot going on at the harbor, but that is the place where the public can really access the water. And it's super important. Next slide, please. So these activities we've talked about and are obviously important. And if you'll see in the next slide here, we have created even a floating dock that will give us some additional access to the water. Next slide, please. And so this is the area we're talking about that's shown in the dotted line in the upper right-hand corner, which includes the Prince George Street Park, Gateway Park, and the Burtis House and Maritime Welcome Center. So next slide, and we'll zoom in on that area. So here you can see the brick promenade that is kind of wrapping around the Burtis House and Maritime Welcome Center. Burtis is going to be elevated, as I think you know, to a finished floor elevation of approximately 8.5 feet above sea level. And in order for that building to have its contextual relationship to the ground, it really only wants to be up about 18 inches to 2 feet above the adjacent ground plane. So we will be at about elevation 6.5 with the Prince George Street Park, as well as the promenade on the, I'll call it the south side, adjacent to the park. And then the area that's currently the parking lot there between latitude 38 and Burtis will be sloped, and it will slope down to Prince George Street, which is one of the lowest spots that we have there around City Dock. So you can see some of the kayaks. We're creating a educational area there, which we've gotten a lot of input, even most recently at the City Dock Action Committee meeting about, having a sustainability and environmental education area there. It certainly is an appropriate place to do that. It's also an opportunity maybe to launch kayaks as well. And so this building and this in this complex, if you will, of Burtis and the Maritime Welcome Center is really a 360-degree kind of space that has access all around it. It addresses the water as well as the park side, and as well as the kind of western side there, where we have some emergency vehicle access to Prince George Street. Next slide, please. And really what I'd like to do, if you can skip ahead, please, 2 or 3 slides. I want to talk about the massing before I get into the design of the building. Just skip forward, please. Next slide. So the Maritime Welcome Center has all these different functions that we're accommodating. And as the mayor mentioned before, we've got the birdhouse that's shown up in the top right. We've got the Harbor Master building. We've got acres, almost, it feels like, a parking there. And all these get compiled and into the footprint of this new Maritime Welcome Center. There's also an adjacent small electrical structure that will house some of the components as well. But they're very comparable in terms of footprint. We're about 2,000 square feet each. It's actually less with the Maritime Welcome Center. So I think that's important in terms of thinking about the footprint. Now we're trying to be very clever about how we use the upper level and even a basement level to conceal some of the space that needs to occur here at the Maritime Welcome Center. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite views in Annapolis, really looking out over towards the water at the top of Main Street, really near the circle, where you get elevated enough to see the water really pretty well. And even Eastport and the Eastern Shore in the distance. There's some trees that you'll see there, which are actually the trees that we're proposing. So we've added those to this view, so you get a sense of what it would look like in the completed, in its completed form. You do not see the Maritime Welcome Center here or Burtis House. They're off to the left. But this is an important view that we really think it's important that we maintain this view corridor. Next slide, please. So at the foot of Main Street, and because Main Street's not perfectly straight, you get a little different view at the foot of Main Street, where you start to be able to look beyond, in between 110 Compromise Street there at the bottom of this cone of vision. And the building in black that's shown, there's the existing Harbor Master building. And you see it's a relatively narrow kind of cone of vision that you get from that perspective. And so we wanted to understand, okay, what does it mean with our new Maritime Welcome Center to have that footprint at City Dock. So in this next slide, you'll see, next slide, please. You'll see that indeed from the foot of Main Street, we do constrict that narrow cone of vision a little bit with the new Maritime Welcome Center from the foot of Main Street. But it really opens it up significantly when you look at it from the front door of the Market House building. Next slide, please. So this shows you the kind of that perspective that you get from the Market House in between the existing Harbor Master building and kind of 110 Compromise or the hotel. And then in this next slide, you can see the view that we get with the new Maritime Welcome Center. Next slide, please. So it actually, that view actually increases to some extent, maybe an additional 15% or so. So we think that's important. And I think if you look at these next couple of slides, you know, you'll realize, in the next slide, please, you'll realize how, you know, in the past, there was always such a hubbub of activity here at City Dock, lots of maritime existing buildings. This historic view is looking up Prince George Street from the Burtis Basin, with Burtis House just on the left there in the foreground. And then all the various structures that were around it, you know, at the time, some with vertical siding, as you see there next to Burtis on the left. A variety of architecture, shapes, forms, etc. And in a lot of ways, that was interesting at the time when there was a lot of maritime activity going on here. Next slide, please. So we thought a lot about, you know, what is the proper architecture and design character that we should be presenting here for the Maritime Welcome Center. And because the scale of the building is such that it has to be significantly less than even 32 feet to the ridge, because we're measuring from the ground plane around the building, we really thought it was more appropriate to think about residential scale buildings, of course, and homes. And these are some coastal residences that we rather liked, just in terms of form, shape, and materials especially. And in some cases, you get a little bit more of a window fenestration area than you might get with some historic homes. But because of the proximity to the water, we got a lot of input that was really important to be able to have views out of these structures to really celebrate Spa Creek, the Severn River, etc. So you'll see vertical siding, wood, natural materials, soft natural materials, cedar shake, and certainly shed ridge roofs as well. Next slide. So James showed this view a little while ago, and I really like it. I think it really speaks to our party for City Dock in general, which is this grand idea, historic really in nature, in that we're creating a barrier to rising seas with a green park and green infrastructure. And I think it makes so much sense. We do need some, of course, deployable flood barriers to complete our resiliency. But I think it's important what we've been able to do, and to be able to create an amenity for these Dock Street buildings and all of downtown is truly something I think very historic in nature, and a real game changer, as the mayor mentioned before. So you can see how it opens up nicely to the water. You see the new Maritime Welcome Center here, the 2 shed roofs that we're proposing, and I'll talk more about in detail. in just a second. Let's talk some more about the massing, though. Next slide. This is looking, of course, towards the field house at the Naval Academy across Ego Alley. And you can see the two shed roofs, the two sheds, I like to call them, that we're proposing, that anchor Dock Street. Dock Street is really made up of this tapestry of buildings, various heights, shapes, etc., ins and outs. Nothing is quite straight or lined up. And this building, we think, continues that pattern and anchors Dock Street nicely. And it's pedestrian wooner that really connects you to the water from the Market House area and from our small parking area that's left over. Next slide. And then looking back towards the city along Dock Street, I think you get a good idea of the breadth of this wooner that's shown in brick paving here, and the ghosted in massing of our two shed roofs for the Maritime Welcome Center adjacent to Burtis. Next slide. So we think this is really the right location for this building because of the fact it does open up the view corridors and it fits with the scale of Burtis and the rest of Prince George Street. I'll quickly go over the floor plans here, which obviously have the Visit Annapolis component, and it's a major entry into the building will be in this upper left corner, where we think can be a traffic cop, if you will, inside the building that can direct people to the right locations within the building that they need to find, whether it's the boaters facilities or functions, cultural legacy museum functions that may be happening in Burtis or the National Park Service or whatever it may be, accessible toilet rooms, and most importantly, we have to have two stairways and an elevator to create access to the upper level of Burtis and the upper and lower level of the Maritime Welcome Center. On the front porch, I like to call it, of this structure, we're calling it a Waterman's Co-op. The idea being that we really think there's an opportunity here for potentially a raw bar. Maybe it's a place you can sit. It can be programmed in different ways. There might be weddings there. It would be an incredible space to be able to occupy that's partially covered during the boat show and other types of activities. But it is accessible. On the south side, we've got boater facilities that hopefully will make really help Annapolis have world-class facilities for boaters who come here, far better than what we have currently in the existing Harbor Master building. And then the outdoor classroom space that I mentioned that could be kayaks and environmental education space outside of the building. We've also got some seating areas on the bottom of this image. You can see along the promenade where you can look out over the water, watch races, and also opportunity to get some greenery as well. Next slide. Upstairs, we have the very important Harbor Master function, which is about 1,000 square feet, not counting the outdoor balcony. And the Harbor Master has access to that entire balcony, as well as the conference suite when it's not being used for some other function. But we think it gives them a great view of Spa Creek and even the Severn and certainly Ego Alley. Otherwise, we have stair and elevator functions here and one convenience toilet room on this upper level. The upper level of Burtis is still open for some uses, but it obviously would be some great flex office space for maritime use, or potentially if we have the programming for it for some other kind of cultural museum use, which would be fantastic. I could imagine someone being able to maybe rent out this entire suite up here for some type of maritime conference, especially or any other similar type of use. Next slide, please. And on the lowest level of Burtis, next slide, please. On the lowest level, our basement level, we have a dry-proofed area. We're not building a basement under Burtis, but we are building showers and amenity bathroom space for boaters. But we also have public restroom facilities. They're so important in these types of spaces. If we want to maintain cleanliness throughout this area, we've got to give people restroom facilities and also storage space. One of the biggest things that we've heard is the lack of storage around City Dock, or for the city in general, for programming uses, whether it be chairs or other accoutrements. So that's the idea here, is that we can really store some things that are going to be necessary for the various robust programming that will happen at City Dock. Next slide, please. So this is a view looking obviously above Susan Campbell Park. So you start to get a sense of some of the design here that we're proposing for the Maritime Welcome Center. You'll notice the 2 shed roofs, and each of these 2 sheds, some of the input that we really got from our very talented design subcommittee of the City Dock Action Committee was the idea that some pushing and pulling of these shed elements to create a little more variety and diversity was welcomed. An opportunity then to create a balcony off of that space was important, as well as addressing the waterfront. Further input that we got. So you'll see our flags and balconies there looking out over the water. Next slide, please. And then looking at this from, obviously from the kind of the market house area, looking out towards the water, you get a sense of how these 2 shed roofs interact, how it connects to Burtis. And we're really studying how we connect to Burtis in a very sensitive way by using a small glass hyphen that connects to Burtis and allows the elevator access and stair access from Burtis. They'll be important as we make it an assembly use. We get more people there than a historic home would have, obviously. So we have to have new stairs as well as an elevator for the upper level of Burtis. The interaction with the other buildings on Dock Street, I think it anchors Dock Street nicely here. And then we start to transition our grade down towards the water a bit, as you can see, but it's a very generous Woonerf and a nice area that can be used and programmed as well, in addition to the Green Park. Next slide, please. And I want to talk a little bit about the materials. This is obviously at kind of eye level, looking down towards the water. Again, next slide. And then this is the water side of the Maritime Welcome Center. And, you know, in our schematic design here, we've located flags, the Annapolis flag, the American flag, and the county flag, the balconies that project out over the water. The similarities in the shed roofs with the Burtis house, the materials we're proposing are kind of a cedar shingle roof and siding that is somewhat continuous. It's a bit more of a modern motif, obviously a contemporary motif, and vertical siding, the lighter color that you see there around the window. And then the windows themselves probably be metal and kind of a bronze finish. And we think that it's soft and in contrast to Burtis with its horizontal wood siding, and you know, it still has some of that diversity that the City Dock architecture has always had. And again, you see just between the two where you get this glass hyphen piece, I call it, which is the connection between the two buildings for vertical transportation. Prince George Street Park on the right, which is elevated from its current location, and Burt is sitting there nicely and hopefully restored someday soon. Sitting on top of Prince George Park there, and as it transitions down to the rest of Prince George Street. Next slide. This is an elevation drawing, of course, of the Maritime Welcome Center, facing what we'll call Plan South. We have the opportunity, I've mentioned the materials already. We have this kind of front porch element on the lower level, the balcony above. We've got an opportunity to put mechanical equipment in between the two shed roofs and to screen that nicely. You really won't see it so much in perspective at all, but you will in this elevation view. Our building heights are, as you can see here, 29 feet 10 inches above the finished floor, and then we have another foot or two to work with the grade around the building, since we're using the average grade at setback in order to determine the height for this. Next slide, please. And when you look at this in context, you can again see how we're measuring this with the height to the cornice line, which is our most challenging, tightest dimension to work with, and then the top of the ridge roof, which is achievable because we're using two shed roofs rather than one. Next slide. And then this is the elevation of Dock Street, all the way from 4 Dock Street there on the left to the Maritime Welcome Center. The diversity of heights, as I mentioned, this is an elevation view, so the field house tends to loom quite large, but we won't be the tallest building by any means on Dock Street, even though we are starting at a higher elevation because of the new building code requirements for finished floor to be 7 feet above sea level. I think it complements what's there. We've got a variety of things going on, and I'm convinced that these structures will be improved once we build this new amenity next to them as well. But we're really pleased with this building. It's a relatively petite building, and I think it fits in nicely with the character of Dock Street, but it's also something that I think we can be happy with in terms of its the contemporary times in which it's built. Next slide. So this is a view from the corner, which is rendered a bit. So you can see our flags and our signage facing the water. And this is how we'll anchor Dock Street with the Maritime Welcome Center. Next slide.
Thanks so much, Bryce. And we just to wrap up, the next steps for the Planning Commission and HPC, you will be seeing the site plan for the City Dock Park. Planning Commission, hopefully in December, HPC in January. And then in terms of the Welcome Center, this broad-based community engagement process will proceed for the next several months, where we'll take direction from both of you this evening, from the council, from the community, and then bring back iterations. Next slide, please. We have already at the City Dock Action Committee work session, there was a good hour where people broke out into groups, and we got tons of terrific comments, some about educational, environmental education, looking for diverse business opportunities while this is being constructed, and after it is constructed, continuing the City Dock resiliency all the way around from basically from the Yacht Club to the Naval Academy, bringing back Waterman, having a greater presence for the design on the water itself. These are just a few of dozens and dozens of terrific comments we got. And so next slide, we are here now to listen to you, get your thoughts, your ideas, your direction. Thank you so much for your patience tonight.
Well, thanks, Eileen. I appreciate the presentation, and this is looks really nice. So I think at this point, let me just open it up first to see if anybody has any questions or sort of clarifying questions, comments, and then then I think best thing to do would be to go around the horn. But let me first see if anybody has any specific questions that we want to get answered.
I do. This is Diane.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the one question, it's just a clarifying question. When Burr Vogel showed some slides early in the presentation depicting the flood barrier, it looked to me like there was still a segment that wasn't included. But then I read one of the public comments from Carolyn Mitchell, who said she was heartened by Matt Fleming's indication that Fleet Reserve had now signed on to the flood barrier and that we are complete from the Naval Academy to the Yacht Club. Can somebody just clarify what, if anything, has happened there and whether we do have complete barrier protection now?
Burr?
We will have complete barrier protection.
What does that mean?
We don't now. That's what I was getting at. I think your slide was
So
clear
I don't have a barrier slide in this slide deck.
Okay. So can you jump back to that slide? It was like the third slide in your presentation where it showed, it looked
Slide
like
number
up to
4.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like the Fleet Reserve Club finally is
I can
in,
do that. It's just gonna take.
Oops. Oh, I think I lost somebody.
The slide after this, Madeline. Next slide. Thank you.
Right. So that area that is in the AE zone and doesn't look like it's, well, it just looks
What
different than
slide
the
is it?
rest.
Right. The problem is this isn't a flood barrier slide.
Okay. So what is that section that there's green, and then that area that's not green? What is that section?
Would I be able to share a screen? I'm asking.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's come back to this one when I'll bring up something that would be a better visual. You should move on. This will take a second for me to get a file open, unless James wants to do it. But I don't know if he's ready. No. Okay, I've got this. Just move on to other questions while I bring up the screen.
That's it for me. Yeah.
Well,
Okay, anybody else? Oh, go ahead, Bob.
can you imagine me not having questions?
Never.
I only have 9. Let's start off going back down Dock Street towards the Market House. What's happening with that section where there continues to be parking? Because it looks to me like that horrible sidewalk in front of Mission Barbecue and the ice cream shop and Armadillo's has not been changed, and that nothing, and that the parking lot itself hasn't even been sort of reconfigured. I will say that I think that within 10 years, I think that parking lot is going to disappear when people realize how attractive City Dock Park and everything else that's being done, how attractive it's going to be and increase business, that those businessmen will finally give up on their 35 parking spaces. But in the meantime, what's happening with that sidewalk and the parking area? That's question number one.
Okay, and let me just ask Madeline, it's probably easier to leave the presentation up. This is about 9 slides from the end, is a view of representing what Bob is asking.
And maybe James, or I can address that, but
Madeline, go forward a few slides, about 5 slides. That one does it. The one you just showed is good enough. There.
So everything stops at that little street. I mean, it doesn't look like there are any changes other than something, a little green island in the middle of the parking. What's going on? What's the planning on that?
well, I guess what I would say about that, when we did the consensus plan, this was the great compromise that we made with the business community there, that some parking would remain. In order for there to be any parking, we really had to keep those 2 bays of parking because we've now cut off the rest of the access to Prince George Street, you might say, and from in order for vehicles to turn around. It's further complicated by 2 other things. One is the boat show. This is the big drop-off spot for the boat show. That active park that James talked about will become the staging and loading area for the boat show. And they're going to have to drop off everything there generally. And goods will be running back and forth via golf carts once they get their boats in place. The other is buses. It's really important that buses can pull up here. There'll be a couple bus parking spaces, and the buses are going to have to turn around at that point to exit. So unfortunately, perhaps the width of that parking area stays the same, and thus the sidewalk remains narrow at Mission Barbecue down there. James, anything else you want to add about that? And then the promenade on the, I'll call it the south side, is modified to some extent in that we have planters there, but we're really not increasing the width of the pedestrian access, and nor do we think it really needs to be widened there.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a couple things. One is you mentioned the bus drop-off area, and so we've heard from business owners and tours that embark from the end of City Dock that, they actually had trouble coming to terms with how far the drop-off was going to be. But we have resolved that with them. And so this is, in a way, a compromise on that topic. And there's also the undergrounding of electric lines, which will actually open up some of that sidewalk and, in effect, add more area to the sidewalk along those businesses. But I think, the project requirements given to us were to preserve that convenience parking.
And Bob, if I could just add, there was James and Bryce are summarizing months and months of meetings with some of these stakeholders. There was great angst, I think would be an accurate description, particularly from the buses that bring people to Watermark and just bring people downtown, because they wanted, the people have to get out, people have to walk the length of that area. The bathrooms are closer to the water. And so I think getting this area was, in the initial concept plan, it was the area that was kept for all of that and it remained the area for all of that activity.
Well, I could imagine one redesigning this so that it's a hardscape, meaning that when necessary, buses come in and can turn around. When necessary, boat show loading can go on, but that's only for 2 weekends a year. But most of the time, it could be a very large hardscaped plaza that could then become quite flexible. I think not only will this parking lot disappear in 10 years, but I also think that you're going to find another way to bring people off buses and onto shuttles at the Navy Stadium parking lot. And that's how people are going to get downtown. We're not there yet, but that's been envisioned for the past 15 years as the ultimate solution to a fair amount of traffic. And of course, buses are not built for a colonial city. I would like to see when the site plan comes in, I'd like to see more detail about what's going to be happening there, because it looks like a bit of a forgotten asphalt sea.
And Bob, just so it's clear, that is not part of the scope. I mean, we will do what we can with it, but that is not part of the project actually ends where you see it end.
Okay, that's too bad.
Yeah.
That's too bad, because that's what people see first. All right, that's the first question. I'd love to see what you are designing for it, even though it's not technically within the scope. The second question has to do with trees. It's gratifying to see a fair number of trees because, as everybody pointed out, shade's a big issue. But I wonder what kind of accommodations are being made for trees and the inevitable saltwater infiltration that's going to occur. How are you going to protect the root structures of these trees and make it big enough so that the trees actually get big enough to provide shade? What are your plans for that?
James?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. I would say 60% of the trees are going to be, maybe it's more like 50% are behind the flood barrier. So we're not expecting saltwater infiltration into those rooting areas. And then for the trees that, inevitably during larger floods would get saltwater inundation, we're selecting species that are tolerant to that. To your question about the rooting area, you'll see in the detailed plans when you're able to review them that we're proposing structural cells, also called silva cells, under areas of paving where the planting area is restricted, so that there is additional rooting area so that those trees can grow to the sizes being shown in graphics like this one.
Mm-hmm. What kinds of trees are you thinking of planting? Are you planting medium height trees, or are you thinking of planting big, oaks and maples?
It's a mix, but there's oaks and maples in the proposal. London Plains. I don't have the list in front of me right now, but and they're all native species, but we are trying to provide a lot of larger shade canopy trees.
Is there saltwater intrusion from below, not only from above, from flooding, but is there also saltwater this land was just built on fill. So do you get saltwater intrusion from below?
I think the question is about the water table, which eventually will rise.
So what does that mean?
Valid question.
What does that mean for the roots of, an oak that wants to reach down 20 feet?
They don't reach down 20 feet.
That's
they
true.
grow
That's
like
I'm
in
sorry.
the top 3 feet.
Really? That's the depth of a mature oak or maple?
It just spreads out further.
Okay.
To the limits of the canopy.
Okay, I'm glad to learn that. So will the water table rise that high?
I think it is a valid question. So it's something we can look at, but I do think there's lots of species, of trees that are going to be tolerant of this, because like you see on the creeks of the bay, there's lots of, forests that grow right down to the water's edge.
Okay, I look forward to what you find out and what you propose. And that'll be in the site plan application when we get it.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I just want to I would want to follow up on Diane Butler's question about on the other side of the Spa Creek or Vigo Alley. Is the Fleet Reserve actually going to be behind a flood wall? And what about the hotel? How are they going to protect themselves? And then there's the.
I'll bring up my screen at this point, and we can talk.
Okay, all right, great.
If somebody will let me.
Yep, you should be able to now.
All right. This was the old plan where we were our flood protection was going to be along Compromise Street. I need to switch over to that window, leave Zoom. Bear with me, something happened to it. I'm not used to doing Zoom, so it's a little funny to me. Okay, here we go. So yeah, the old plan had flood barriers along Compromise Street, and then we would have to jut through the parking lot here. And then either tie into the Fleet Reserve, where more or less the Fleet Reserve would become part of the flood barriers, or figure out something in front of that. What I was talking about on my slide is that what we're going to do now is simply extend the concrete bulkhead that we have here on the northwest end of Ego Alley, all the way down in front of 110 Compromise, through the parking lot, end of Newman Street, and in front of the Fleet Reserve. So I've got that cost budgeted at about $8 million, and I think the project can afford it. And I think it's very important that we do it this way. And I'll turn things over to James or Bryce if they want to add any additional comments, but I'm going to go ahead and move my screen down through some of the other slides that James prepared a few months ago to just show kind of how bad the original plan was. The red would be fixed walls. The yellow would be barriers that would have to go up and down to allow cars in the parking lot. So there you go. Protecting along the water, I think, is very much the right answer.
So is what's the situation with the hotel?
Well, the hotel's substantially elevated, right? Its base floor elevation is quite high, and then you start thinking about the volumes of water that it would take to go through the hotel and out their front doors. I think our pumps would be able to handle a decent amount of that, but if not, we'd maybe be able to get away with some knee walls in front of the hotel. But just getting us to the Fleet Reserve and up to the hotel is going to provide a tremendous amount of flood protection. It's going to get us almost all the way up to 8 feet.
Okay. What kind of walls are you proposing from in front of 110 Compromise and Fleet Reserve?
Exactly what we have at the northwest end of Ego Alley. Cantilevered, sheet pile, concrete cap, and then with deployable barriers on top of the concrete cap.
So the concrete is walkable, or benches, or help me out here. Is there a walkway on the water side of the wall? I mean,
why do you need a walkway?
Well,
there's the walkways on the land side,
okay.
The bulkhead is between the water and the pier.
How high is that bulkhead?
4.5 feet.
Okay, so a little kid couldn't see over it, but an adult can.
Well, I mean, 4.5 feet. That's the elevation.
What does that mean?
It's 18 inches to 2 feet.
Okay, so
it's all relative to the walkway.
Okay, there's an answer.
You might be able to see it in one of these pictures. Kind of like this.
But that's higher than 2 feet.
Not terribly.
Okay. All right. So that's what you got. Have you thought about the glass? Are you satisfied with the glass or not?
We don't need to do the glass
Yeah,
now
we wouldn't be
because
doing glass.
with this new strategy.
And when you protect, if you protect along the water and you do glass, let's say in front of the top tank, that won't work because people wouldn't be able to get off their boats. The barriers that take us up the additional 3.5 feet from 4.5 to 8 have got to be something that lay flat or were manually installed in advance of a tropical storm, something like that. But boaters have to be able to get off their boats and onto the land.
You know what might help at some point? I know that this is coming late in this whole design program, but it would be great to see something about even line drawings of what that's going to look like. That would be really helpful. You might get some constructive comments if we could take a look at it at the next date that we get together, or even before then. So the next question has to do jumping back over Ego Alley and over towards Gate 0 and the end of Prince George Street. Has there been any thought between the city and the academy about access to the waterfront? Apparently, Ms. Johnson said they're going to build a flood wall that will run pretty much from Prince George down to the point. Would there be any possibility for public access along that walkway?
Zoe, are you here? Yes.
Yeah, I'm still here. Yep. We're continuing to have conversations about sort of the look and the feel about how the flood wall will tie in with that wall and potential public access opportunities down there at the end of Prince George Street. So probably more to come on that. But we're also trying to figure out exactly how the two projects tie in, both in terms of the timing and construction, as well as sort of the more of the technical aspects.
I mean, I do want to compliment you. That little park that's right on the other side of Gate 0 is really an incredibly attractive park, but it's kind of orphaned, off from from anybody really getting access to it. But it's a very dignified and really nice place to be if one can get there. It would be great to see that continued all the way down. I would encourage you to continue thinking about public access along that bulkhead.
Yes, we definitely are, and we're exploring a few concepts. So
great.
More to come on that.
View sheds. Did you ever do a kind of a view from the water? What things will look like from the water, and is that important to even know?
Bryce here.
Yes, no, I think it's important. We really don't have it from the cockpit elevation from the water, and that's something we should create so that we can share it with you. I think we get a nice terracing up to the park that it's only a few feet, which I think is nice, and it will read well. But it's something we really don't have to share at the moment, but we could have that for next time.
Right, because it is a maritime welcome center. So
absolutely.
We want to see. Okay, great. I look forward to that. With respect to the Welcome Center, first of all, I do think it's a handsome building. It's really nice. I really like the materials. And I'm beginning to understand why you're so taken with the 2 shed roofs and all of the opportunities that it gave you. But one of the things that I've been sort of hearing on the street is that it's big, it protrudes, and it kind of puts the Burtis house into a secondary kind of status. And I just wonder if at this stage, even though you've obviously done a lot of work on this, what are the possibilities of flipping those buildings, of putting the Welcome Center on Prince George Street putting the Burtis house protruding, that bit that you have to protrude, but it would put the Burtis house in a very, it's an older building, and it would give kind of an older sense to the whole promenade. It wouldn't be as imposing. I just think that if there is disappointment or resistance to the Welcome Center and where it is, it may be because it's so prominent, and that the Burtis house, if you flip them, and you have to reorganize your internal arrangements of the Welcome Center for sure. But nonetheless, it's at this stage, you haven't gone to engineering on these things. It might mollify a lot of people in town. So I don't know if it's even possible, but it would put the Welcome Center on that Gateway Park, and all of the possibility. Anyway, that's, I think, enough said. I'd like you to keep that in mind if that's the kind of thing that comes up and there's kickback on that.
Bob, I think there are a lot of issues that have more to do with Burtis. Bryce, do you want to answer that now, or do you want to think on it?
Well, I think I would just say that, first of all, we want to get this right. So we're not too far. That's for sure. We need feedback. In terms of flipping them, I feel like the activity is really going to be around the park, and that Prince George Street is the quieter, more residential street, and that Burtis has a better role to play there because it's more in its context, it's more authentic in that location. I understand the comments about if people feel that the Maritime Welcome Center is more dominant. I think that was always the case at City Dock, that Burtis played a smaller role because it was a small little house. So I'm not sure I can change that. The maritime buildings, the seafood buildings that were historically there did the same thing to Burtis. So to me, it makes sense to have Burtis on the quieter street and to have the Maritime Welcome Center be more of a presence where I think more people are going to be, which will be on City Dock and Dock Street and City Dock Park.
Okay. I just keep it in mind that it may.
But I will. And
right. It's a bizarre proposal, but it may work, given what might be said. Mr. Tower.
Thank you. Bob, that the city acquired Burtis from MHT, Maryland Historic Trust.
Yes.
So there's an easement on it, a historic preservation easement. So it's unlikely that they would agree to move the house.
Does the easement require it to stay in the same location?
The easement's very strict.
Yes.
All right. I think that's a consideration.
And also keep in mind, we are designing the Maritime Welcome Center within the easement area. It will be reviewed as part of the easement too. So it's important consideration.
Okay, I agree. I'm just saying that, things can get agitated, and a possible solution might be to put that Burtis house in the more prominent visual location. And Bryce Turner has mentioned other considerations, which I think are valid, but I just think I would like everybody to keep it in mind as a possibility if we're faced with that. I'm gonna let go of a couple of I have one question, then a comment. The site plan that we're going to get, the application for the whole area, the site plan that we're going to get, is that going to include the Welcome Center and that Prince George's Park? Is that it?
Yes.
It is.
No,
It is.
it will be for the City Dock Park.
well, does that include the Welcome Center and
No.
Prince George? So
No,
we will not see that? Why is it? we're
not for
seeing
the
it?
site plan. The site plan is for the City Dock Park. The
Why
other, the
is-
Welcome Center is going to take a while. That will come later separately.
Well, I think that part of it needs to be incorporated into what we're going to see and what we're going to, deliberate and possibly approve. I don't see how you can leave out such an important component.
Bob, they're separated.
I understand that the timing is important.
The City
Sure.
Dock Park is ready to go forward, and we wanted to have as much public comment and discussion on the Welcome Center as possible, so that will come forward later.
Not happy. And my final comment really relates back to something that happened, I don't know how many years ago, with the very first city dock master planning that we did in a small group that was led by Chris Jakubiak. And I remember a comment that Anthony Clark, who was part of the group that runs Galway Bay and a bunch of other Irish restaurants around, who said, this park needs to be for 3 generations. And I think that you have achieved that vision. I thought that comment that something for everyone incorporates that. It's really exciting in many ways. I think that there are probably a lot of details and we're going to be thrashing them out. You're under a tremendous deadline to get things done. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have some time and some opportunities to make modifications. I'm really concerned that we get pushed into things too quickly, but I'm also concerned that we take too much time. So I'm quite aware of what the deadlines and so forth are. Be aware that in December, we're not going to have a lot of meetings.
We know.
Okay. So anyway, something for everyone. Good job. Good job, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. So other members of the Planning Commission? Anybody else? So let me just finish up with the Planning Commission. So Bob covered a lot of the sort of questions, comments that I had. I do echo the same concern over the sidewalk next to the parking lot piece. I'm just always worried that it's going to be a choke point, and that people won't get past that to the good stuff. So, I understand about the scope and such, but, making that not a pinch point, however you can, I think is important, because you got that really nice pedestrian space on Dock Street. And, you listened to us in the past on that. And I like the fact that it's, can be programmed different ways, and it's really looks very pedestrian friendly. But if you can't get to it, or if it looks uninviting because you have to walk through a parking lot to get to it, it sort of nullifies a bit of all of the goodness that's down there. So I realize there are constraints, but I think that has to be looked at really carefully.
Alex,
Okay,
we hear you and Bob on that, and we will look at it before we come back.
Yeah, good. Okay, so if there's no other questions, comments from the Planning Commission, I'll turn it over to Bobby and how you want to go around, with your folks.
First, John, did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
Well, I mean, I have plenty of statements I'd like to make, but why don't the commissioners go first? Unless you.
Okay, no, I thought it was related to something someone in the Planning Commission said. I was just going to let you finish.
I'll tell you, there is one thing, the one burning question in my mind is why the layer of trees at Claude Street? It's like a screen that blocks any water views from the Market House and the upper Dock Street lot. You have a number of trees there, and I'm concerned about the openness of the view.
John, before I have the landscape architect answer, I will say we had numerous dozens and dozens and dozens of people pleading for trees. You have two different perspectives. You have the perspective of no trees, open views, and you have the perspective from people who want to be able to use the park in the summer. They feel it's a heat island, it's hostile. And so the landscape architects tried to balance those perspectives. James, do you want to add anything?
I just want to make sure I understand the location you're talking about. Which
Well,
street?
Claude Street is the cross street that goes to Prince George Street from Dock Street.
Craig Street, probably.
Craig?
Oh, sorry, Craig. Oops, sorry.
Claude Street's in West Annapolis.
Right, sorry.
So you're referencing the bosque of trees in the active park.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Eileen's point, that's the trees are really the way in which we think we make the space comfortable during the warmer months. And I was down at City Dock this summer, and there were limited locations where people were sitting, and they were all in shade. So that's what we're trying to accommodate. For what it's worth, those trees are immovable planters, but that's more related to be able to host the larger events in that space. But
Well, it does have a tremendous effect on the views. It's not a small thing. I mean, it's part of city code that when you're designing for an area that terminates, especially at the water, that you leave it open to view. So it's an important consideration. The other thing, though, is there is shade under the pergola. That too, there are areas there. I've seen it designed with chairs and game tables. Your designs change, but there's another shaded area. It would be interesting to see not from an elevated viewpoint in an architectural rendering, which is most of what we're seeing, but from a pedestrian viewpoint, how it would look.
mm-hmm. Yeah, we could share that when we come back.
Right. I'd love to see that. So that was one consideration for me. If other commissioners would like to ask questions. And Bob, you're muted.
Ms. Collins, you're muted.
I'm muted and I'm telling Will he's muted. I'm not doing very good there.
I'm unmuted.
Good, you're up.
Thank you. Well, I want to say, as I often say when we have these joint meetings, that one of the reasons I retired almost a decade ago from the Planning Commission, because I knew that Bob would stay and ask the important questions. And to that point, I agree with him wholeheartedly, and Alex, concerned with that little area that I understand exactly what the compromise was and why the compromise was made. And I'm not saying that I disagree with the sensibility of the compromise, but I agree with Bob and Alex. That area really is going to not serve the city in the best way possible, and will probably eventually disappear, I hope, as Bob predicted. The only other thing I want to say tonight, given the hour and the thoroughness of the presentation, is how much I think the whole team, Eileen and Bryce and all the others, have responded to the public input. And I think it's a tremendous improvement. And I'm very anxious to see the formal applications come forward.
Okay. Leslie or Kevin?
Hey, Bobby, I got a couple comments I wanted to make. Going along with the comments about the parking lot being a barrier, Randall Street near the Alex Haley Plaza is still 4 lanes wide there. That's a massive barrier to connecting from the city to City Dock and all these great amenities that are being planned and designed, and that's currently outside the scope is I think a missed opportunity, because 4 lanes is a massive barrier for pedestrians. And along with the other comments I wanted to make, the design of the Maritime Welcome Center, it looks very nice, but for the Preservation Commission, we would need to see how it complies with our guidelines and standards. The visuals we saw were very nice, but that's just not how we have a standard approval. So when the final presentation for HPC comes along, that's just the guidance there is to just follow those guidelines for how we like to see those things presented.
Absolutely.
Yep. I can't tell if Leslie's still on the call or not. I guess not. I think the only other person left was Kim Golder. Did you have anything you wanted to add or questions?
Thank you for asking. Not at this time.
Okay. Just a couple of things from me. As we go forward, I too would like to see a little bit more information on what the views from the water are going to look like. And for the same reason that Bob said, I think it was Bob, that this is a waterfront, a maritime welcome center. You know, we need to know how it's going to look when people approach it from the water, because I'm sure a lot of our visitors hopefully will. I don't know if it's possible or not, but a lot of the issues that I'm having in my own head about size and mass and things, I'm wondering if it would be possible to actually get a 3D model made of what this is going to look like with everything to scale, so that we could potentially, you know, stand in front of something and get a real sense of how one thing relates to another. And if that not being possible, is there some kind of given all the AI that we have out there, some kind of video that could be made, that could be manipulated, so that we can really get a sense of what it would be like to stand in front of the Maritime Welcome Center and see what the mass looks like. And if we turn to the left, what it looks like looking down Dock Street, something like that. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm kind of throwing it out there as something that I think could be really beneficial. I would
Bobby,
also echo
one thing that we did today with the city council that might be really helpful was we brought them out to the site. We had everything chalked off, but we also had a lift so people could go up and see the exact heights. And I think that would be a good starting point to bring the commission, the planning commission and the HPC out and do that. And then see what else above and beyond that you would like, because it's important for you to have a real sense of what is the height? What do I see from that height? I went up in the Scary with the mayor controlling it, but I went up in that lift today, and it was very interesting for me to see from that height exactly where the building would be. I think it would be helpful for all of you.
Okay, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So Eileen, will that lift be there on December 6th?
Well, I believe, Mr. Mayor, if we still have Mr. Mayor can get the lift. So we should figure out when we'll work with you. Mr. Mayor, you have access to that lift, don't you?
Yeah, I'll bring it back for that. Yep.
We'll figure out the date for everybody and we'll get the lift there.
I would also say, Commissioner, that we do have, because I know my colleague who's listening in here, a senior designer, on this project, Skylar Roberts is thinking he has a model of this now that is very close, if not there, that we can spin around and you can look at all different views. It's a full three-dimensional model. Now, it's not a physical model, it's a digital model on a computer screen. But yeah, it's very compelling.
Yeah. Because I like everything I'm seeing and I really like the work that's been done. I just feel like I need to get my arms around, you know, a lot of the different perspectives we're going to see and the sizing and the massing. And I would imagine that we're going to get a lot of questions from our city residents as well as this goes forward. And if we had already kind of looked at this, I think it would be really, really helpful.
Absolutely. So I'll work with John Tower and also Tom Smith or Eric or Chris for the Planning Commission to put that together.
Okay. And then I would echo what Kevin Smith said about our guidelines, because as we look at the Burtis House and the new Maritime Welcome Center, both very attractive. I like the initial ideas, but we're going to be judging it against our guidelines. We're going to be looking at how the new building relates to the old buildings on the street. How does it fit in with them? It doesn't want to look exactly like them because we don't want it to look like it's always been there, but it needs to fit in. You know, how many windows are there? Is it too glass, too modern, things like that. We're going to be looking, you know, all the things that you always hear us talk about in our meetings for bulk and scale and appropriateness of the building and the components of it. Are the materials the right ones for that area? I like the idea of the weathered wood siding that you've talked about, but that's unlike anything else in that area. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in Annapolis. So, you know, we need to have a conversation about whether it's good to be introducing something that's so different. Yes, we want it to stand out and we want it to look, you know, like something new and unique, but it still needs to work with everything else that's in that area. So, but yeah, I think, you know, as we go forward and have longer conversations about Burtis House, we can kind of go more in depth into those things. I don't think we need to do it right now. So, but I really like everything that I've seen tonight. I was lucky enough to be in City Hall when you made the presentation earlier today, and it was so nice to be able to see the slides up close and see all the things that I couldn't see there, because it's very encouraging to see the work that's been done so far.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Collins, may I respond to Mr. Smith?
Sure.
Mr. Smith, you're right on about how difficult Market House Plaza is and getting across all that. And you're right, it's not within the scope of what's being done now, but it will be part of City Dock 2.0. It's going to be the next iteration, and it'll be a really interesting experience.
Yes,
Thanks,
everything
Bob.
the other side of that sidewalk, we're all looking forward to affecting at some point.
Yeah, I traverse that part of the city multiple times every day, and it's not a pedestrian friendly area when I walk my second grader to school.
Not
They
a
call it
cyclist friendly
the Great Wall of Randall Street.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Bob, we have to hold on.
Okay, so I think we're getting pretty much wrapped up here. Anybody else have any go backs that they want to mention?
No.
Okay.
Looks like the mayor has his hand up.
Oh, I didn't see that. Gavin?
So he's got something to say?
Yeah.
So I just want to really quickly say, we're trying to build a park that the locals want to go to first. We're trying to build a part of the city that all of us will be proud of. Be realistic. None of us take our friends to City Dock. None of us take our friends to show off that part of the city. We go to different restaurants or we go to Main Street. But really, I think, you know, we have to commend the designers here. I didn't design the Waterfront Welcome Center. I didn't design the park. But I know it's going to be something that we're going to brag about. And it's going to be, we're saying this is going to be one of the best parks in America. And we truly believe that because, you know, it's an extension of the historic district. It's going to be amazing. You know, we're already is amazing with the water access that we have. But, you know, really, I don't think it's been stressed enough, you know, and I would say that everything I did on West Street was about doing stuff for locals, taking care of the people that live here first, making a place that everybody feels comfortable in. And that's the goal here. And I truly think as we work through this process, we're getting closer and closer. And you know, this is going to be something we're all going to brag about and we're all going to own. So I just want to say a big thank you to everybody.
Thanks, Mayor Buckley. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Gavin.
Thank you.
All righty. So at this point, I think we can wrap up the work session. And once again, thank you to the team for making the presentation and answering our questions. And we
Great
look
job.
forward to-
Thank you.
Thank
Yep,
you.
we look forward
Yeah.
to seeing more. And as everybody mentioned, I look forward to meeting in person down there. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. We'll
Okay.
try and pick a day it's not snowing.
Yeah.
Please.
All right.